A number of headlines came out of President Trump's CNBC interview, including on lowering drug prices. Here's what he had to say to that.
I'm doing something that nobody's ever done before. As you know, for 30 years, Europe has had drug prices that are, in many cases, 1/10 the cost of drugs in here. Same manufacturing plant, same everything. 1/10. I've invoked favored nations. Now, there is no favored nations clause. I've just said there is, okay, because we're not going to pay 10 times more for a pill than they pay in Europe. Then that's going to have a tremendous impact on the price of medicine.
News MoneyWatch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, good to see you again today. The president is saying that they'll place a tariff on pharmaceuticals of up to 250%. So what does this mean for Americans who are struggling right now to pay for their medicine?
So it's really going to depend on what these different drug companies do. Do they absorb that tariff? That's going to be a very, very big tariff to absorb. Or do they pass that on to consumers and make it more expensive, for you to buy, whether that's over-the-counter medications or something, that you would get covered through your insurance. Now, what I will note is in that same interview, he mentioned that it wouldn't be 250% right away. It would be a small tariff to start, and then I believe the timeline was within a year to a year and a half, it would step up to 150% and then a max of 250%. Previously, we had heard him say 200%. Still, I'm talking about really big numbers here, but
yes.
This is the highest tariff proposal that we have heard the president mention. Now, we also know at the same time that companies like Eli Lilly and Johnson & Johnson have made pledges, investment pledges to build more manufacturing plants here, bring some of that drug manufacturing more to the U.S., which is the president's goal with these types of tariffs. But that doesn't happen overnight, and it will be interesting to see how that is offset with what the president was just referencing in the clip that you played from that CNBC interview, because that was an executive order to bring drug prices down, but then this tariff proposal would, of course, likely bring drug prices up. So we'd have to see how all of that shakes out in the wash.
Yeah, something else we have to wait and see how it shakes out. We shall wait. We don't have a choice on that one. All right, so Kelly, let's turn now to tariffs on India, because President Trump says he will increase tariffs for that country substantially over the next 24 hours because of course, their involvement with Russia. How much business do we even do with India, and how would that affect our wallets here in the U.S.?
So in 2024, the total back and forth trade of goods between the two countries was right under $130 billion. And there was a trade deficit, meaning that the U.S. bought more from India than India bought from the U.S. to the tune of roughly $46 billion. That was sort of the argument for the initial tariff of 25% that is set to go into place on Thursday. What you're talking about is an extra import tax added on top of that. The president hasn't specified how large that would be, just that we would hear that amount within the next 24 hours or so. So it's going to be larger than 25%, though, you can certainly assume, based on what we know so far. In terms of what that would mean for consumers at home, again, I go back to it's how businesses would react. Do they absorb that? Do they pass that on? Do they source from other places? But you think about the types of things that we get from India. A big one that you and I talked about last week, smartphones. In the second quarter, they became the biggest exporter of smartphones to the U.S. when Apple moved a lot of its production from China over to India. But this extra tariff is all a negotiation to try and get them to stop buying oil from Russia, which, of course, Russia is using that revenue to finance its war in Ukraine.
Yeah. The president also touched on the EU, and they've just decided to implement a 6-month delay on retaliatory tariffs. So just how significant is this, and what does it mean for American consumers? What does it mean for us back here at home?
So no real change for American consumers, but this is a big win for American businesses that sell products into the EU, because when the EU slaps a retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods. That means it's more expensive for people in the EU or businesses in the EU to buy those American products. So good news for the U.S. businesses. This is all because they are looking to negotiate the sector tariffs, that being steel, aluminum, copper, and that's sort of an ongoing thing that was mentioned when they came up with that framework of a deal that would put a 15% tariff on all goods coming from the EU into the U.S. So more to come there, but certainly good news for any businesses that are looking to sell their products into the EU for the next 6 months.
And we shall take good news wherever we can get it. CBS News MoneyWatch correspondent Kelly O'Grady, thank you for your time today.